What is going on, journalist family? Irvin Felix John with the Fitness Journals, where I provide education, entertainment, and authenticity to the calisthenics game. So we have another question here. We're gonna get right into it. We're not even doing introductions no more, man. We're just gonna get right into it. So, like I said, we're gonna be answering questions that I get from people submitting forums, and this is the next question coming from Robert. So Robert, this is what he asked. Can you lose fat and build muscle at the same time? And the very short answer is yes, you can, right? But just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So why would someone want to build muscle and lose fat at the same time? To keep it real, because they're lazy, right? And that's not a terrible thing, right? But if you want to, and I'll explain that in a second. If you want to maximize results, trying to do multiple things at one time is not something you want to do. I'm telling you, you want to focus on one thing in particular, get those results, and then move on to the next thing. So, and Robert, I'm not saying that you are lazy. I'm just saying that, and to be honest, sometimes being lazy can help you figure out a better way of doing things, right? But like I said, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So let's talk about muscle building first, right? Excuse me, and we're gonna take a little sip of water here. So, muscle building, right? How do you build muscle? How do you build muscle? So obviously, as we know, resistance training, or maybe you don't, but resistance training could be weightlifting, it could be calisthenics. There's a calisthenics channel, so let's talk about that. So micro trauma to your muscles, breaking down and rebuilding, breaking down, rebuild, break down, rebuild. And every time you break down and rebuild with the appropriate nutrients, guess what? You get stronger, you build more muscle. Now, muscle is very metabolic, right? And like I talked about in previous videos, it can almost be viewed as a liability because all the energy that it takes to maintain. Wonderful, right? Yes, that is wonderful. Now, if you have a good amount of body fat, that muscle definitely helps with keeping that fat off, burning that fat and keeping it off. So that's why it's definitely great when you're doing calisthenics, very high volume, developing that lean muscle mass. And the more lean muscle mass you develop, obviously we're not gonna neglect diet, and we're gonna talk about that in a second. I got something over here on the screen, so stay tuned because I'm gonna jump over to the screen and I'm just gonna walk you through, because it's very important to understand how micronutrients work and the role they play in building muscle and burning fat. So automatically, you want to build lean muscle, right? That's number one. What I would suggest, and what's probably the most beneficial thing, you always have to see where you're starting, right? So if you're someone who obviously is very high on the BMI scale, you're obese or severely overweight, there's a different approach than someone who is maybe they're in shape, but they are on a winter bulk, and they're like, okay, now let me get leaner for the summer. I'm already kind of lean, but let me get leaner for the summer. So depending on where you're coming from, Robert, and anyone who can relate with Robert right now, you have to keep that in mind. So always pay attention to what part of the sequence are you in. Are you overweight? Are you an athlete but packed on some body fat during the winter? If you're a bodybuilder, all these things you have to take into account. So let's just assume, right, that you're someone who's pretty average. You're not super overweight, you're not super skinny, you're just kind of right in the middle there. Maybe you have a little bit of lean muscle mass. We'll take it as that, start from there. Make sure I'm in focus, okay. So, more or less, right, when you're thinking about an approach from an average person, looking at your caloric intake, that's definitely one place to look at, right, to start. And if you did not watch my video, you're gonna read it right now, so you could go ahead. I'll put it around the video. I don't remember the title of it, but I put a free meal tracking guide in there, so you can download it. You go through the free meal tracking guide and you'll know exactly how much you're taking in by using MyFitnessPal. It's super easy, super straightforward. I put together 11 steps, 1, 2, 3. If you follow it step by step, you shouldn't have a problem trying to figure it out. So go through that one first before even jumping into this one. Obviously finish the video, but just go through that one first and follow the steps there as far as knowing how much you're taking in, what's your caloric intake, and you should know what is the range that you should be in for either losing weight or gaining weight. Like, so you have to know that. Know what range you should be in. Number one, obviously the maintenance. So where am I right now? Just to maintain my bodily function, you know, heart beating, lungs, respiration, you know, all that. But if I wanted to gain weight, how much would I need to take in? What would my surplus have to be? Or if I wanted to lose weight, what would my deficit be? And identify those numbers. So once you know that, you should be able to identify what range you should be in for either or. So if you want to build lean muscle mass, you have to make sure your protein intake is sufficient. So obviously the other macronutrients, but the main thing we're looking at here, which I'm going to talk about all those what are macros and all that. So if you don't know, don't worry, just stick with this here. But you have to have a sufficient protein intake if you're breaking down your muscles. Keep this in mind. If the rate of degradation, the rate of breakdown of the muscle tissue surpasses that of repair, you're going to get injured. You're not going to see the progress you want to see. Number one, you're going to be injured. So that alone will hinder you from seeing progress. That's kind of all you need to know. So ensuring that you're in a surplus slightly, yes, overall with the caloric intake. If you want to build lean muscle, you have to be in a caloric surplus. So building lean muscle and burning fat at the same time, you want to be in a surplus, but not so great that you're putting on a lot of excess body fat. So in the form of, let's say, you should have your carbohydrate intake should be just enough where it's able to fuel your workouts, but it's not so much where you're bulking, like you're putting on a lot of the extra body fat. So it always comes down to, I don't want to make this more complicated than it is. It's really not that complicated. It comes down to your overall caloric intake matched with the proportioning of your macronutrients. Just because you're in a caloric surplus does not mean, you're in a caloric surplus, you're like, okay, great, I'm going to be lean, I'm going to pack on lean muscle mass. No, you have to make sure the ratio of the protein, carbs, fats are adequate for what that goal is. So it only has to be a slight, a minor surplus. And I always say that whether your goal is to lose weight or gain, don't make the numbers so drastic. Like, don't make it like, okay, let me just for day one put in 1,000 calories, or day two cut out 1,000 calories. That you want to give your body time to adapt, right? That's why, like, even year after year after year, me being like, I don't really move too far away from my baseline, which is like 200 pounds. Like, no matter what, it will always fall around that. I don't count calories now. I don't need to. I don't even do the anatomical landmarks, which is like using your hands, okay, carbohydrates, proteins, I don't even do that now. I just know. I just look and I'm like, okay, I know. No matter what food I'm eating, or I just feel like I know how I feel. So that comes with actually going through it over time. You can't do that the first time. Like, if you don't have no idea if you don't count, you're not going to have a clue. And if you don't know, okay, how much how many calories in a serving of 1 cup of rice, like, if you don't even know that, you're not going to be able to wing it. So when you want to, if the goal is to build lean muscle, like build muscle and burn fat at the same time, I wouldn't recommend doing it if you're new. Like, I wouldn't recommend doing that. And by the time, if you're a little bit more seasoned, then you probably wouldn't even be asking that question. You would know exactly what works. But like I said, the principle, a slight caloric surplus, which could be roughly 200, 300 calories per day. There's so many variables. If you watch my other video, I can't give you a specific number. I just can't do that. Like, it has to be specific to you, to your lifestyle, how much you burn and all that on a day-to-day basis. your climate, the climate, that you're living in. All these things you have to take into account. So I can't give anyone a specific number, but if you try it, okay, let me just try 300 surplus every day. Make sure my proteins, let's say half a gram per pound, something like that. Let me pay attention to that, and let me see after 3 weeks. Let me see what happens. And if you're not tracking data, you're not going to know. You just will not know. Like you're gonna waste 3 weeks by just doing it and not tracking. And because if it works, great, it works. But will you be able to duplicate it? Probably not. And if you do, it's like starting from scratch again, trying to figure it out. And if it doesn't work, you're not gonna know why it didn't work, right? So let's take a break, right? When I say take a break, let's go ahead and jump into this. I hope that made sense as far as what it requires, what it takes. I'm just gonna reiterate, if you want to build and burn at the same time, it is kind of like an oxymoron, because like to burn, you have to be in a deficit, right? But to build, you have to be in a surplus, right? But when I say like you're building lean muscle and burning the fat, like that comes down to the macronutrient balance. So you can be in a surplus and your body composition can change where you're leaner if the macronutrients are balanced. But it is just not the best thing to do. Like, yes, pack on that lean muscle in the surplus, and if you really want to show the definition and the striations, then go into a deficit after that while paying attention to the macronutrient balance. So macronutrient balance, caloric intake. So let's go ahead and turn to the screen, and I'm gonna run you through what are macros. Let me just tell you right now, what are macros: protein, carbohydrates, fats, and then I'm gonna break down each of these, and you'll be able to download this. I'll put this in the link in the description or in the comment box, and then you can download this, and then you can use it and read it and memorize and all those stuff and utilize it for your day-to-day. So let's go ahead and jump into that. All right, so this is coming from one of my courses, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I already have it in depth, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to be dissecting a little bit more. As you know, we do science, and I always want to make sure I'm bringing you guys quality, and quality is proof, right? So basically, I'm going to take this as an approach of a physique athlete, right? So physique athletes are those who structure their training, nutrition, and lifestyle in a quest to achieve the ideal human physique, right? So essentially, this is what it means, right? Even if your goal isn't to be a physique athlete, if you want to improve the way your physique looks, what is the way you should be training? What is the things that you should be looking at? You should be looking to increase lean body mass, obviously, decreasing body fat percentage. And remember, I just spoke about being aware of the portion sizes of your macronutrients, protein, carbs, fats, and then obviously overall caloric intake, right? So energy balance is carbohydrate, calories in, calories out. Building muscle and burning fat at the same time. You have to really dial in with your numbers if you do in fact want to do that. Like, you have to know your numbers. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the summary here. Estimating the daily energy needs for a physique athlete. And remember, when I say physique athlete, I'm not talking, yes, if you want to improve your physique, you are a physique athlete, even if you work a desk job. So they will be needing a calorie deficit to reduce body fat levels. A low to moderate calorie deficit should be used in order to retain as much lean body mass as possible. 1 pound of body fat per week is the ideal amount of fat loss. Changes to caloric intake should be small and gradual, ranging from around 100 to 200 kilocalories or calories at a time. So without going down the rabbit hole here, if your goal is to build lean muscle and burn fat at the same time, is that optimal to do? Depending on where you are in your journey. That's ultimately what it comes down to. If you are severely obese, your goal should not be to just pack on as much. You're going to be building muscle regardless, like under that, but revealing that is the thing that you want to do. So for me personally, like I don't bulk. I don't, well, when I say I don't shred, like it's easy to shred, but I don't bulk. If I do, it's you can barely tell. Like I still maintain like pretty much the same physique all the time. I just get a little bit leaner. My goal is not to be a bodybuilder. Now, initially, early on in my journey, like yes, I didn't really know what I was doing, so I would eat a lot, bulk up accidentally, and then that would help me as far as packing on more weight and turning, the my excess calories into muscle mass and whatnot because of how I started to train. But is that the best way to do it down the road, like bulking up? I think it depends on your goal. Personally, if you want to improve the way you really look, bulking up progressively, like what I even put here, gradually, ranging from around 100 to 200 calories at a time. Yes, I think that's sufficient. Now, if you're trying to become a professional athlete, as far as like being on the stage and whatnot, the numbers are going to change a little bit more than that. So, I'm not going to go through all of this. This is in my courses. The refeed, low carbohydrate or calorie restricted diet will lead to down regulation of metabolic rate. This is super important for you to understand whether you're an athlete or not, but still important, especially if you're dieting, right? Thyroid hormone output, sympathetic nervous system activity, reproductive organs, testosterone and estrogen, and much more if not carefully periodized. So it is super important to know this stuff. People damage their bodies because they're not aware of things like this. They do extreme dieting. Oh, I want to get shredded and build muscle at the same time. Oh, let me crash diet. And then you end up burning yourself out. That is not good, right? So refeeds talks about how like those things are avoided, the period of time to be doing that. So I'll just talk about protein real quick because this is important. And these numbers are so there's so much variables that dictate what the numbers actually are. The way to absolutely know for sure is just go what the range generally is recommended, and then you pay attention 2 or 3 weeks. How am I looking? How's my body transforming? And then you make the appropriate adjustments, right? So the latest research on protein requirements for these athletes, physique athletes, us, if you're trying to improve your physique, shows 2.3 to 3.1 grams per kilogram of lean body mass can provide optimal benefits. High protein intake is especially important to protect against extensive muscle losses during the energy restricted diet. So if your goal, right, you're like, look, I want to burn body fat while building muscle, increasing your protein intake to maintain lean muscle mass is your best bet, right? Obviously paying attention to be quite frank, you can drop down it depends. None of this is set in stone. I can never generalize, but I'm talking about what I've used for myself and hundreds of clients, and like what gets highly like similar results across the board, right? Obviously the variables can be different in either which direction, but roughly 100 grams of carbs, if you play around with that and see how you feel, because remember, carbohydrates are not necessary to maintain life. Our body can adapt and utilize, amino acids, fatty acids, as energy source, and it doesn't have to be from glucose, from carbohydrates. Is it the best thing to do? That's debatable, right? But and I talk about that in my other lessons as well. So I'm not going to let this run out for too long because I want this video for you to be able to just use these practical things. Ultimately, look at your total caloric intake. What is the range? What range you need to be in if you're way up, like I want to lose weight, you need to see what caloric range you need to be in to progressively shred down. If you're like, I'm way too skinny, you can build up. It might take a little bit longer. It all depends on, obviously compliance, how dedicated you are to your training. Are you compliant with your diet? Are you, sticking to that 8-week progressive bulk? Are you doing those things? All these things are super important to keep in mind. So I have so many different lessons on these things where we go into in depth about it. And look, I'm not saying to sign up, but I'm basically saying sign up if you want results, right? And there's nothing to lose, because no matter what, you can start for free. If you get the information you want in the time of the trial, then you don't pay a penny, right? It's really that simple. That's how confident I am in my ability to get people results, because it's science. It's not like I'm making stuff up. I literally follow the science, and the results are just like they come. It's by default. So let's go ahead and jump back into the main video, wrap it up there. But just understand the numbers. You got to pay attention to the numbers. If you want to watch this in depth, then you can hit the link in the description. All right, so if there's one thing that we're learning, I hope you're understanding that data is important, right? Yes, the goal, no matter what the goal is, if you understand the data, if you understand the approach, it will make it a lot more predictable. You're not gonna have to guess, right? Yes, at the beginning, you're not gonna have a super clear vision or pathway. What do I need to do? That's okay. At least understanding the principles, the concepts. What does it take to build muscle? Okay, look at my protein intake. Look at my overall caloric intake. What does it take to burn fat? Okay, look at my protein intake. Look at my overall, look at my macronutrient balancing. So all these things, like I said, it sounds complicated until you do it. Go through the meal tracking guide. It teaches you how to actually track your meals, so you're not confused. You don't know, you won't wonder, okay, am I in a surplus? Am I in a deficit? You'll know, right? And then paired with your actual training, if you have something like an Apple Watch or something like that, it shows you roughly, none of these things are 100% accurate, but roughly how much you're burning, roughly how much you're taking, well, with the Apple Watch, roughly how much you're burning, or any type of fitness tracker, so data is super important. I love data because like I said, I don't like to guess. It just makes it a lot easier to end up where you want to when you're tracking data, when you're collecting data. It gives you a picture, right? Like when you just have all these components, it's like taking a puzzle and then trying to just step back and say, what picture is it? It's not gonna work like that. Like when you have the data, you're like, okay, let me start here, put this together. Okay, I kind of got it, all right? It's coming together like that. I kind of see what it is now. And then the more data you have, it creates that complete picture. That puzzle comes together. Now it's a clear picture, right? And it makes your life easier. I know it was probably hard to believe, like what, to go through all that data tracking and blah, blah, blah. It paints a picture, it tells a story, and that's why having data is super important. So that is it for now. Stay tuned for the next video. If you have not, like I said, submit. I answer the question from people who completed the form. There's literally thousands. I'm gonna go through all of them. I can't go through all of them, it's impossible, but I'm gonna go through as many. I don't know if y'all can see that. Let me just dim this a little bit, but there's a lot, right? So if you have questions, like a lot, we stop right there. I can't do muscle ups, okay? And then we continue. We're gonna scroll, right? And then we're gonna stop right here. Handstand, right? We're gonna scroll again. There's so many. Muscle pain from weights. And then we're gonna scroll again. Let's see. How to stay motivated in my late 30s. I used to be highly active. So there's so many. And that's great because it always gives me something to answer more and more questions about, right? So if you haven't gone through my free calisthenics program, go ahead and do that. If you have not gone through the consistency masterclass and you're struggling with consistency, there's no way that you should have not gone through that class. That will create a clear vision, a clear pathway, clear action steps, what you need to do in order to gain consistency and get the results you're looking for. So that's it for now. Health is wealth. Get money. And remember, it's always the warm-up.